The Supra is one of the best sports cars in the world and one of the most divisive. A lot of folks write it off as being simply nothing more than a BMW with a Toyota logo on the front. To be honest, if that's what the Supra was, I would still be fine with it because that would be an awful lot of fun. But the reality with the Supra is a bit more nuanced. Obviously, this is the close sister ship to the BMW Z4, but here's what happened. BMW really wanted to bring back the Z4. Toyota really wanted to bring back the Supra. Neither company had enough money to make a go of it, but together they could, and together they created the Supra and the Z4. These two vehicles collectively were designed to combat Porsche, specifically vehicles like the 718. This is targeting the regular coupe, the Z4 targeting the Roadster. And they were developed in coordination with one another using BMW parts because that made the most sense. BMW had the inline-six engines, Toyota had specific tuning requirements for the suspension, and of course the styling. Then, of course, Toyota has one of the largest dealer networks in the US, so it really ends up being a great marriage. If you want BMW performance with Toyota-like driving precision, I actually prefer the way the steering and the suspension feels in the Supra to the Z4, then you're going to want this. You can also find it and service it at your local Toyota dealer. And perhaps most importantly, for 2023, you can now get a manual transmission Supra, something that BMW is refusing to offer on the Z4. I'd love to know your thoughts on the styling of the Supra. I think this is the most attractive Toyota vehicle and more attractive than anything we find in the Lexus family currently, although it is not without its detractors, mind you. I love the 6-module LED headlights here. The front end is definitely very, very aggressive and very distinctive. The styling of this was modeled after the FT1 prototype or concept car. We have a clamshell style hood that goes all the way down and around to the sides and actually becomes part of the front fender treatment right there. It's a really attractive and unique look. But from some angles, this doesn't look quite as sexy as that FT1 concept. That was definitely wider, it was a little bit angrier in some areas. Some of that is due to the production reality of a car like this, and some of it is because, again, this is more of a close relation to that BMW Z4. So the two manufacturers had to get together to decide how big the car was going to be, and they decided to target Porsche very, very directly. Moving to the rear, we have these very aggressive rear fender flares. It really gives us sort of a Jaguar-style look from this angle. The large rear haunches help house 275 with tires in the back, and then we have the duckbill spoiler or ducktail spoiler that the Supra has been known for a while. We have LED taillights, and this particular model is the new limited edition manual transmission trim, so some of the trim around the vehicle changes a little bit. We have things like the matte mirror caps and different treatments to the underbody. Also this very unique sheeny paint. From some angles this looks sort of blue, and from some angles it looks sort of like wet concrete. Let me know what you think about color changing paints like this down in the comments section as well. Now let's dive under the hood. Don't let the Toyota logos under the hood fool you. BMW engines are what we find under here. The base model has a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder engine. This one has a 3-liter inline 6. And if you look closely, there are even a few little BMW logos around the engine bay. Some purists may be offended. Doesn't bother me at all because BMW makes some absolutely excellent inline 6s, and this is certainly one of them. 382 horsepower, 368 pound-feet of torque, and in true BMW fashion, it's likely underrated because when you take a look at the 0 to 60 times of the Supra and the Z4, these are definitely better than we find on the current generation Nissan Z. Now, I have recently driven the Z with the manual and the automatic, and I'll give away a little bit of the game here up front. I would take this over the Nissan Z any day. Under this hood, we find something interesting as well. The manual transmission. Now, Toyota didn't just run out and grab a BMW manual and swap it in under the hood because BMW didn't have one already that mated to this engine. We don't know exactly which manual transmission they may have used. It may be a ZF, it may be a Jetrag, or it actually might be an Aisin 6-speed, but either way, it's the only way to get this sleek 2-door, 2-seat thing with a manual transmission from Bavaria. But I suppose technically not really Bavarian because this is built in a Magna Steyr factory in Austria, but those are details you probably don't care about. As you'd expect, the bulk of this interior is common with the Z4, the buttons and switches on the ceiling, the driver and front passenger seats, etc., all the seat controls. Seat comfort is very good. These seats have 4-way adjustable lumbar support as well as inflatable side bolsters. The front doors are pretty similar to other BMWs with tweaks to the styling to make it look a bit more like a Toyota, like those JBL speakers and this stripe running right across the dashboard. The infotainment system is a prior version of BMW's iDrive system, not the latest one. We then have a series of physical and touch buttons here. You touch them to see what's going on, and then you actually physically push it to change that option. Dual zone automatic climate control, Qi wireless charger, and then of course The entire reason we're here taking a look at this vehicle, the manual transmission shifter. Now, I will say that my preference is for reverse to be over to the right and then down, but over here we have it over to the left and up. That's generally okay by me, but twist here, we do not have any sort of a pull toggle or anything like that. You simply push it all the way over, push it forward for reverse, you then pull it back, and then push it forward into the first gear slot. That does make some finer multi-point turn maneuvers a little bit trickier, but you'll probably get the hang of it in the end. Over here on this side, we find the BMW iDrive infotainment controller, pretty similar to other BMWs. Over here, we have buttons for the drive mode selector. This allows us to choose between the various drive modes, auto start, stop, disable button to turn on and off the active safety systems in the vehicle, and then an electric parking brake behind. And then right here between the two front seats, we have two pretty decently sized cup holders. The steering wheel is the same one that we've seen in the Supra since it launched. We have a two-tone leather wrap on this particular model that I think is really attractive. Big disc right here in the middle with a small Toyota logo in it. You'll find the controls for the cruise control over here on this side. No adaptive cruise in this particular model, which does bum me out a little bit. And then over here we have controls for the infotainment system. We then have a full LCD instrument cluster. Well, actually, I suppose you'd say partial LCD really, because these are LED gauges on the left and right side for things like the fuel level and the engine temperature, but everything else is a full LCD in the middle. We then have a physical element with this little ring right here, and you can actually touch the ring. That may make cleaning this display a little bit tricky in the future, because you have to clean those individual elements and all the nooks and crannies right back there. But it's an attractive display, and it's primarily controlled with this BC button over here on the turn signal stalk. Now let's talk about how the Supra manual transmission drives. First, the manual transmission itself. This has the intelligent manual transmission feature that we find in a few other Toyota vehicles. Basically, it's engine software, not transmission software, since it's fully manual. In this software package, what they do is they give you a little bit of extra torque to help keep the engine from stalling when you're shifting the transmission, and they rev match when you're downshifting, which is a nice feature. You can turn that off if you don't like it, however. Clutch engagement is pretty nice and linear here, and I love the engagement feel of the transmission itself. This has a direct linkage, of course, because the manual transmission is right under the center console, just as it is in most rear-wheel drive vehicles. So it has a really nice, pure engagement feel, not a rubbery one like you sometimes get in manual transmissions that are cable-driven. This has really nice gear ratios too. First gear is not too high, so you can really get a decent start, and the rest of the ratios are nicely spread, so if you do plan on doing things like autocross style courses like this, you'll find yourself in third gear most of the time, which is generally the gear that I prefer for this kind of course. Obviously, second gear is going to be a bit more fun though, and due to the rear-wheel drive nature of this, you can certainly get it to step out on a course like this if you want it to. But the stability and traction control system will really rein things in if you get a little bit too wild. Obviously, handling is what the Supra is all about, and the purity of the feel. That's something you're really going to notice if you do take this out on a track or an autocross course, or if you're just driving it spiritedly on your favorite winding mountain road. Toyota has done an excellent job tuning the steering of this vehicle and the suspension, which are a little bit different than the BMW. That is kind of a weird twist, one that not everybody expects, but universally, most of the people that I know in the industry that have driven this and driven the BMW actually prefer the way that Toyota has tuned the steering. Now, that's not too much of a surprise for me, because I generally prefer the way that Lexus rear-wheel drive models are tuned as far as the steering goes versus some of the BMW competition. But here we have the best of both worlds, because the big problem with Lexus performance vehicles has been they just don't perform like the German options. Only here we have the combination of Lexus steering tuning and German power. Speaking of German power, you should know that if you want the best 0 to 60 time, you're going to want the Supra with the automatic transmission. That will go 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. This one, even with a professional driver, it's probably going to be a little over 4 seconds, and if you're not a wizard on the pedals, then it's probably going to be somewhere around maybe 5.5 seconds. Just depends on how fast you are shifting and how much you're willing to roast the clutch. But any way you slice it, this is more engaging than the automatic transmission version, and I love the way this transmission feels. The upshifts are excellent, the throttle match downshifts are great, the engagement makes it really easy to know exactly which gear you're in. This is a really, really well done transmission, and I love the gating here. It's not an enormously wide swing from first gear on over to fifth gear. Everything is fairly compact. The throws are not overly short. It's maybe about 4 inches, I guess, from one side to the other, but everything really comes together when you're out on the road. In modern vehicles, manual transmissions are not about acceleration times, they're about the feel, and this is certainly more engaging than the automatic transmission, and it's just a lot of fun to row the gears yourself. The combination of the clutch engagement, which I think is just about perfect, the rev match downshifts, etc., and the relatively short throws mean that you'll probably find yourself shifting for no particular reason other than just to hear the engine-matched blips, things like that, and the excellent exhaust note coming from this 3-liter engine. Now obviously, if you want the next level of performance, you are going to have to go German. If you want more than 400 horsepower, 0 to 60 times that are way below this, there are options for you, but few of them are going to have the combination of price tag, feel, and handling ability that we find right here in the Supra. That's what makes this such a compelling option. When it comes to the actual metrics on the Supra, pretty much everything is going to be the same as the last time I drove this model. Handling, ride quality, everything is very, very similar. I do think that the ride quality in here with the adaptive dampers is better than the 2-liter turbo model. I spent the earlier part of the day driving the 2-liter turbo Supra out here to this racetrack location in Utah. I found that suspension tune just a little bit on the firm side. If you get the adaptive dampers, you have the ability to change that tuning just a little bit. Mind you, there's not quite as much ability to configure the suspension as you'll find in some vehicles. You just have the choice between normal and sport damping, but normal is a little bit softer than the 2-liter turbo, I find, and sport is just a little bit firmer. As far as cabin noise and fuel economy goes, it's pretty much the same as every other Supra. If you want to get your hands on the new manual transmission Supra, these already went on sale in August of 2022, so head on down to your Toyota dealer now, put your money down, you'll probably get one before the end of the year if you're lucky. It will set you back at least $52,500 because you have to get the 3-liter inline 6, so no 2-liter turbo with the manual. And for that, I'm eternally grateful because, as we've seen in some other luxury brands that have tried to bring back a manual transmission, kind of, sort of, they've put the manual transmission with the base engine because they claim that's what people want. I really think people are wanting the extra power with the manual transmission, and that's exactly what Toyota has done here. Now, if you want the special edition A91 MT, which is this one right here, then you're going to be paying more for that. This one, $58,345, plus a few little options brought this just over $60,000. Now, on the bright side, that is significantly less expensive than the Porsche that this was designed to compete with. And I would probably get this over the Porsche as long as you were okay with having this logo on the front of your performance vehicle rather than the Porsche logo. If that's a problem for you, you could of course get the BMW, which is going to be very similar, but no manual transmission and a snazzier badge on the hood. You'll also pay a little bit more, of course, for that BMW than you will a comparably equipped Toyota Supra. A 2-door Roadster has a very different feel out on the road because of the seating position of the driver and the passenger being practically on that rear axle versus something like a Challenger or a Charger or a Camaro, the less expensive performance vehicles available in the United States. If you're looking for a very unique Roadster driving experience, and of course the Toyota dealer network, then you want one of these. Reliability, we don't really know yet, but it probably will be pretty similar to the average BMW because there's so many BMW parts on it, but you have the ability of that Toyota support network to help back you up. Now, I know some folks are really upset that this is a BMW Toyota hybrid, I guess you could say, rather than being a pure product like we find with the Nissan Z. But the Nissan Z is the exact embodiment of the reason that I like what Toyota has done a bit better. You see, Nissan could not afford to actually redesign the Z. It uses so many things from the previous generation model, and it uses the Infinity 3-liter twin-turbo engine, which power-wise seems like it would compete with this, but in real-world performance, it absolutely does not. It doesn't sound as good as this either, and there's certainly other compromises with that Nissan product. The infotainment system doesn't feel quite as modern, even though this is not as modern, oddly, as the one that we find in the Nissan. And the general feel of the vehicle is a little bit older and a little bit less special in some ways than the Supra. Again, bearing in mind that this shares a lot with BMW products. So let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section as well. Perhaps it's because I've never owned a Supra before, but I think this is the exact right way for Toyota to go, and I hope that they do it again if the Supra gets another generation. I absolutely would not have a problem with another BMW Toyota tie-up because I think this one has gone really, really well. If, on the other hand, you are a Toyota Supra purist, then you're probably just going to be shopping on Bring a Trailer because that's where you're going to find the pure Supra models in the future. See all of you later.